15 years ago, Romina Carter's fingers danced across piano keys at Carnegie Hall while critics predicted her meteoric rise. Now those same hands scrubbed toilets at the Halberg mansion, where she'd mastered the art of invisibility. When billionaire Douglas Halberg mockingly volunteered his black Maid to entertain guests at his charity gala, his daughter Marissa snickered, both savoring the promised humiliation. But as whispers of Romy's past resurfaced and an old mentor emerged from the shadows, the forgotten prodigy faced a choice: remain safely invisible or reclaim the music that had once been her soul's language. The wealthy audience came for amusement. They weren't prepared for what would leave them speechless. The first hint of dawn crept through the windows of Romina Carter's modest apartment as she quietly prepared for another day. Her movements were deliberate and practiced, the routine of early mornings having become second nature over the years. She glanced at the small framed photo on her nightstand, a younger version of herself, eyes bright with promise, before tucking it face down into her drawer. Not today, she whispered to herself, by 5:30 a.m. Romy was already at the Halberg estate, slipping through the service entrance with her access card. The massive property sat perched on a hillside, overlooking the city with imposing grandeur. Morning dew still clung to the manicured lawns as she made her way to the staff locker room, exchanging her street clothes for the dark gray uniform that rendered her nearly invisible to the family she served. Morning, Romy, called Gladys, the head housekeeper, a sturdy woman in her 50s who had taken Romy under her wing 3 years ago. You're early again. Thought I'd get a head start on the East Wing. Mr. Halberg mentioned guests this afternoon, Romy replied, her voice soft but clear. That man changes plans more than he changes those fancy shirts of his, Gladys muttered, handing Romy a clipboard with the day's tasks. But the staff meeting says nothing about East Wing priority. Quinn told me yesterday. Said Mr. Halberg wants it spotless for some art dealers coming by. Gladys raised an eyebrow. Quinn tells you a lot of things last minute, doesn't he? Romy just smiled faintly. It was easier not to comment on the estate manager's habit of dropping urgent tasks on her, always with that thin smile that suggested she should be grateful for the attention. The morning progressed quietly as Romy worked methodically through the enormous house. The other staff members respected her efficiency, the way she could clean a room so thoroughly it seemed untouched rather than sanitized. She moved like a shadow, careful never to disturb anything, never to be noticed. Just before 9, as she was dusting the grand sitting room, soft music drifted from the adjacent room. Someone was playing the piano, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Romy's hands slowed as the melody wrapped around her. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Her fingers twitched slightly, muscle memory from a lifetime ago threatening to surface. Unable to resist, she stepped to the doorway and peered in. A slender man in his 40s sat at the magnificent grand piano, his fingers dancing across the keys. Hired talent, she assumed, practicing for Douglas Halberg's upcoming charity gala. The piece swelled to its emotional height, and Romy felt her eyes glaze over with unexpected tears. One escaped before she could stop it, tracking a warm path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, annoyed at her own weakness, and turned to resume dusting. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice startled her. Jacob Halberg stood a few feet away, watching her with curious eyes. Douglas's son, the one who rarely visited. Romy had only seen him twice in her 3 years working at the estate. Yes, sir. Very beautiful, she answered, eyes downcast as she moved her duster over a side table. I always thought Chopin was overplayed until I heard him performed properly, Jacob continued, seemingly unaware that staff weren't typically engaged in conversation. Do you like classical music, Miss Carter? Romina Carter. She hesitated. And yes, I do, though I don't get much time to listen. Before Jacob could respond, the sharp click of expensive heels announced another presence. Marissa Halberg swept into the room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, designer dress hugging her slender frame. Jacob, when did you get in? She air-kissed both his cheeks before noticing Romy. Oh, you missed a spot. She pointed vaguely at the already immaculate table. I'll take care of it, Miss Halberg, Romy murmured, turning away from Jacob's apologetic glance. These uniforms are atrocious, Marissa said loudly to her brother as they walked away. They? Look like cheap hotel attire. Daddy should really consider something more. I don't know, aesthetically pleasing? We're not running a Holiday Inn. Their voices faded, leaving Romy alone with the distant piano and her thoughts by midday. The estate was buzzing with activity. Douglas Halberg had arrived with a small entourage, art dealers, curators, and what appeared to be potential donors. For his foundation, Quinn Marshall materialized at Romy's side as she arranged fresh flowers in the main hall. Those go in the blue Ming vases, not the crystal, he instructed, his tone suggesting she should have known better. Mr. Halberg specifically mentioned he wanted peonies in the Ming for the art unveiling. I apologize, Mr. Marshall. I'll change them right away. Quinn lingered, watching her work. His perfectly tailored suit and polished demeanor were designed to bridge the gap between staff and the Halbergs, though everyone knew where his loyalties lay. The new piece arriving today is apparently worth more than this entire wing of the house, he said conversationally. Some Russian artist that Mr. Halberg discovered at an obscure gallery in Prague. Make sure you don't get too close when cleaning. The implication that she might damage something valuable wasn't lost on Romy. I understand. As she finished with the flowers, voices approached from the main sitting room. Douglas Halberg entered, surrounded by his guests, his commanding presence, filling the space. At 64, he still cut an impressive figure, tall, silver-haired, with the confident air of a man who had never heard the word no. And this is where we'll display the Volkov, he was saying, gesturing to a bare wall. The lighting has been specially installed to highlight the textural elements he's known for. His gaze swept over the room, briefly registering Romy as she tried to make herself inconspicuous. Something made him pause. You there? You're the new maid, aren't you? Not new, sir. I've been here 3 years, Romy answered quietly. 3 years? HM. He seemed surprised, though whether at her longevity or his own lack of awareness wasn't clear. His eyes drifted to the grand piano visible through the adjoining doorway. Do you play? The question caught her off guard. A little, sir. A ripple of amusement ran through the group. Marissa, who had joined them, laughed outright. A little? That's adorable, she said. Maybe she can entertain us at the gala, Daddy. A little staff showcase. Douglas smiled, the idea apparently amusing him. Why not? For fun. God knows these charity events could use some levity. Romy froze, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. A memory flashed, her 10-year-old self on stage at a youth recital, playing Beethoven's Für Elise with such intensity that the audience had fallen completely silent. Then another memory, more painful, her mother in a hospital. Bed, tubes and monitors everywhere, whispering. Promise me you'll keep playing, Romina. Promise me. A little rusty, Romy heard herself saying, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Perfect. The rustier the better. It'll be charming, Douglas declared, already moving on. Now, about the Volkov placement, the group drifted away, leaving Romy standing alone, her hands trembling slightly as she collected her cleaning supplies. In the kitchen, Gladys cornered her. I heard what happened. Why did you say yes? I didn't exactly have a choice, Romy replied, avoiding eye contact as she washed her hands. You always have a choice, girl. You could have said you don't play anymore. Romy dried her hands carefully. It's fine, Gladys. I'll play something simple and be done with it. There's something you're not telling me, Gladys pressed, her eyes narrowing. There's a lot I don't tell anyone, Romy answered with a small, sad smile. But thank you for caring. That evening, back in her small apartment, Romy sat on the edge of her bed for a long time before finally reaching underneath it. She pulled out a dusty suitcase, the leather cracked with age, and carefully opened it. Inside lay yellowed sheet music, a few faded ribbons, and an old photograph of a teenage Romy standing beside an elderly black man at a piano. Leonard Leo Tucker, the jazz legend who had seen something in a skinny girl from Harlem that no one else had. With trembling fingers, she unrolled a portable keyboard onto her kitchen table. The keys were silent. She always practiced with headphones, not wanting to disturb her neighbors, but her hands remembered. They faltered at first, muscles unused to the stretches and movements, but gradually found their rhythm. As she played silently in her dimly lit apartment. Across town at the Halberg estate, Marissa was laughing with her friends. Can you believe it? The maid thinks she can play piano. She giggled, lounging on her king-sized bed. Daddy's going to have her perform at the gala. It's going to be the highlight of the evening, for all the wrong reasons. That's cruel, even for you. One friend commented, though she was smiling too. It's not cruel. It's entertaining, Marissa defended. Besides, she agreed. No one forced her. Meanwhile, Jacob Halberg had returned to the estate after years of keeping his distance. His relationship with his father had always been strained. Douglas expected his children to follow in his footsteps, while Jacob had pursued humanitarian work instead of wealth accumulation. As he walked through the familiar halls, he noticed Romy quietly straightening a painting in the hallway. "We met earlier," he said. "You're Romina, right?" She seemed surprised that he remembered her name. "Yes, sir. Everyone calls me Romy." "Romy," he repeated. "You're the one my father volunteered to play at the gala?" She nodded, her expression guarded. "Do you need any sheet music? I could help you find something." "That's very kind, but I have what I need," she replied. Before he could say more, Quinn appeared with a folder. "Mr. Halberg mentioned you'd be playing at the gala," he said to Romy, handing her the folder. "These are some simple pieces that might be appropriate. Nothing too challenging." Inside were elementary-level arrangements, the kind given to children in their first year of lessons. Romy accepted them with a polite nod, though Jacob noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Marshall." Quinn nodded and walked away. Jacob watched Romy carefully fold the sheets and place them in her pocket. "You don't intend to play those, do you?" he asked quietly. Romy's expression remained neutral. "I haven't decided yet, sir." "Jacob. Please call me Jacob." She met his eyes. Briefly, "I should get back to work." "Jacob." As she walked away, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to Romina Carter than anyone at the estate realized. 3 days had passed since Douglas Halberg had volunteered Romy to perform at his charity gala. The weight of the upcoming performance hung heavy in her thoughts as she stepped into the quiet sanctuary of the public library downtown. This was her only day off this week, and she'd chosen to spend it searching for something specific: the library's music section was modest but well-maintained. Romy's fingers traced along the spines of sheet music collections until she found what she was looking for: a volume of classical pieces she had once performed in her youth. She carefully photocopied several selections, her movements methodical and precise as she gathered her copies. A man in his mid-40s with intelligent eyes and a thoughtful expression approached the same section. He reached for a book on contemporary composers just as Romy was collecting her things. In her haste, she dropped several papers, including a printout from the library's digital archives. "Let me help you," the man offered, bending to retrieve the scattered pages. His eyes caught on one particular sheet, a program from a Carnegie Hall Youth Showcase 15 years earlier. The name, Romina Carter, was highlighted among the performers. "Thank you," Romy said, quickly taking the papers from him. The man studied her face with growing recognition. "Are you Romina Carter?" She tensed visibly. "It's for a school project." "For my niece," she lied, the words tumbling out too quickly. "I'm Elliot Meyer," he said. "I was at that performance. You played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was extraordinary." Romy's expression remained neutral, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped her papers tighter. "You must be mistaken. Excuse me, I need to go." As she hurried away, Elliot watched her with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. He'd been a junior music critic then, just starting his career, but that performance had stayed with him, a young black girl playing with such emotional maturity that the audience had been left breathless. And then she had disappeared from the music world entirely. Back at the Halberg estate, life continued as usual, though Romy found herself lingering near the grand piano whenever possible. One evening, after most of the household had retired, she slipped into the grand room. The space was silent, illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the tall windows. Romy sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. For a moment, she hesitated, then began to play. Softly at first, a simple melody, but gradually her true skill emerged. Her hands moved with practiced precision, coaxing a hauntingly beautiful nocturne from the instrument. So absorbed was she in the music that she didn't notice Jacob standing in the doorway, transfixed. Only when she finished did she sense his presence and abruptly stand, nearly knocking over the bench. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "I was just trying." Out the piano, she stammered, making sure it's tuned for the gala. That wasn't a little piano playing, Romy. That was masterful. She shook her head. I don't know what I was doing. It's been a long time. Before he could press further, she slipped past him and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Jacob puzzled and intrigued. The next morning, curiosity drove him to his laptop. He searched for Romina Carter pianist, finding nothing at first. Then he tried variations, Romy Carter music prodigy, young black pianist Romina. Finally, buried in the results, an article from 15 years ago caught his eye. Rising black prodigy disappears after tragedy. The article detailed how a promising young pianist named Romina Carter, who had been mentored by jazz legend Leonard Tucker, had abruptly withdrawn from the music world following her mother's death. There was a grainy photo of a teenage girl, with solemn eyes, unmistakably a younger version of the woman who now cleaned his father's home. Jacob sat back, stunned. How had someone with such extraordinary talent ended up working as a maid? And why had she hidden her gift for so long? Meanwhile, Douglas continued his preparations for the gala, occasionally mentioning the staff entertainment to guests and colleagues. We're very progressive here, he told a group of potential donors over breakfast. We've even got our housekeeping staff performing. Shows our commitment to cultural inclusion. The donors nodded appreciatively, unaware of the depth of ignorance. In his words, in the kitchen, Gladys was preparing lunch when she overheard Romy humming a complex melody as she arranged flowers. That's Leo Tucker's Midnight in Harlem, Gladys said suddenly. My husband used to play his records every Sunday. Romy's hands stilled. You know Leo's music? Everyone who appreciates real jazz knows Leo Tucker, Gladys replied. How do you know it? Romy hesitated. I heard it once a long time ago. Gladys's eyes narrowed, but she didn't press. Instead, she said, whatever you're hiding, girl, it's weighing on you. Some burdens aren't meant to be carried alone. That afternoon, as Romy was polishing silver in the dining room, her mind drifted back to her training with Leo. She was 13, sitting beside him at his old upright piano in a community center in Harlem. His fingers, gnarled with arthritis, but still nimble, demonstrated a complex jazz progression. Classical is the foundation, but jazz is the soul, he told her. You need both to tell your story. The memory was so vivid that she didn't notice Marissa entering the room with several friends. And this is where we'll seat the Whitmores, Marissa was saying. They're bringing Julian Kent with them. You know, the music critic who destroyed the New York Philharmonic's new conductor in his review last month. One of her friends laughed. Is he the one who wrote that the performance had all the emotional depth of a kiddie pool? The very same, Marissa confirmed. I've told him we have a special performance planned. Our maid is going to play piano. She glanced at Romy with barely concealed malice. It should give him something amusing to write about. Romy kept her expression blank as she continued polishing, though her stomach tightened with anxiety. A professional critic would be in the audience. Later that day, Romy was surprised to see Elliot Meyer at the estate, chatting with Quinn in the foyer. Mr. Meyer will be assisting with the gala PR, Quinn explained when he noticed her. He's writing a piece for the Foundation newsletter. Elliot smiled at Romy, looking forward to hearing everyone perform at the event. His eyes held a question. That made Romy uncomfortable. She nodded politely and continued with her work, aware that Elliot watched her from a distance throughout the afternoon. As evening fell, Jacob found Romy alone in the library, dusting bookshelves. We need to talk, he said quietly, closing the door behind him. You're not who you pretend to be. Romy's hands froze. I don't know what you mean. Romina Carter, piano protege of Leonard Tucker, Jacob said. That's who you are? Why are you hiding? Her shoulders slumped slightly. Please don't tell anyone, she whispered. Why would you keep this secret? Your talent is extraordinary. Romy set down her duster and sat heavily in one of the library chairs. I stopped playing after my mother died. She had cancer, no insurance. I was 17, trying to pay medical bills, dealing with funeral costs. My father, he left when I was 12. Couldn't handle her illness. But your music, my music died with her, Romy interrupted. She was my reason for playing. After she was gone, I couldn't find the purpose anymore. And then life happened, bills, survival. Music became a luxury I couldn't afford. Jacob sat across from her. But now you have a chance to play again. As a joke, Romy said bitterly. Entertainment for rich people who want to laugh at the help. Then show them who you really are, Jacob urged. You owe it to yourself to be seen again. Romy shook her head. I don't know if I can. Their conversation was interrupted by Douglas's voice in the hallway. They quickly separated, Romy returning to her dusting as Jacob pretended to examine a book. Douglas entered, raising an eyebrow at his son's presence. Jacob, didn't expect to find you here. His gaze shifted to Romy. Ah, our pianist. Have you decided what you'll play for us? Romy hesitated, then answered, Mozart's Sonata in C major, sir. The first movement. Douglas nodded, clearly unimpressed. Sounds appropriate. Keep it under 5 minutes, won't you? We have professional musicians performing afterward. After he left, Jacob looked at Romy questioningly. Mozart? Really? A small, defiant smile crossed her lips. That's what he expects to hear. The next day, Elliot sent an email from his phone while sitting in his car outside the estate. To L. Tucker at jazzlegacy.org. Subject. Former student inquiry. Mr. Tucker, I hope this message finds you well. I'm researching an article on musical education and wanted to confirm if you ever taught a young pianist named Romina Carter around 15 years ago. I believe I heard her perform once and was quite impressed. Any information would be appreciated. Regards, Elliot Meyer, music critic. The Metropolitan Review. Inside the house, Romy found a quiet moment alone in the music room. She sat at the piano and began to play, not Mozart, not Chopin, but something entirely different. A piece of her own composition, one she had started writing before her mother's illness and never finished. It was raw, emotional, blending classical structure with jazz influences, uniquely hers. She didn't see Elliot standing behind a pillar in the hallway, listening. She didn't see the tears that formed in his eyes as he recognized the extraordinary talent that had been silenced for 15 years. And she didn't see him whisper to himself, it's her. It's really her. As morning light filtered through the estate windows, Romy moved through her cleaning routine with practiced efficiency, though her mind was miles away. The gala was now only 3 days off, and she felt the pressure mounting with each passing hour. She had taken to avoiding everyone when possible, keeping her head down and slipping into rooms only when they were empty. While dusting the antique bookshelf in Douglas's study, she sensed someone enter the room and stiffened, expecting Quinn with another list of demands or Marissa with a cutting remark. Instead, she turned to find Elliot Meyer watching her from the doorway. I've been trying to catch you alone, he said quietly. Romy straightened, clutching her duster like a shield. Mr. Meyer, I'm working. I'm not here as a journalist. He stepped closer, his expression earnest. I'm here as someone who sat in Carnegie Hall 15 years ago and was moved to tears by a 13-year-old girl playing Rachmaninoff. Please, I can't do this now, Romy whispered, glancing nervously at the door. I've spent years wondering what happened to that prodigy, Elliot continued. Why she vanished when she was clearly destined for greatness. Life happened, Romy said flatly. People disappear every day, not people with your gift. Elliot's voice softened. 2 nights ago, I heard you playing your own composition. You moved me, just like you did 15 years ago. Romy's composure faltered for a moment. I'm not ready to be that person again, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I ever will be. Elliot nodded slowly. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one performance, to find your way back. He placed a business card on the desk. When you're ready to tell your story, I'd be honored to listen. As he left, Romy pocketed the card with trembling fingers. Outside in the hallway, Marissa observed the exchange with narrowed eyes, her suspicion growing. Throughout the day, Romy felt increasingly on edge. During her lunch break, she found herself scribbling musical notations on a napkin, a habit from her youth that had somehow resurfaced. The music flowed from her mind without effort, fragments of melodies and harmonies that had been silenced for too long. That by evening, she had filled several grocery receipts and napkins with compositions. It was as if a dam had broken inside her, releasing years of unexpressed creativity. When Quinn approached her the next morning, his expression was more serious than usual. Ms. Carter, Mr. Halberg wants confirmation on your piece for the gala. Romy looked up from polishing the silver. I told him Mozart's Sonata in C major. Yes. Well, he wants to make sure it's appropriate. Quinn's lips thinned. And keep it short. You're essentially a warm-up act for the real musicians. The dismissive comment stung, but Romy maintained her composure. I understand my place, Mr. Marshall. Quinn seemed satisfied with her response, but as he turned to leave, he added, Oh, and there's been a change in the program. You'll now be performing between Natalie Brooks and Richard Winters. Romy's stomach dropped. Natalie Brooks was a rising star pianist who had recently performed with the New York Philharmonic. Richard Winters was a celebrated composer and pianist with multiple Grammy Awards. She would be sandwiched between two renowned musicians, making any inadequacy on her part all the more glaring. Is that going to be a problem? Quinn asked, noting her expression. No, Romy said quietly. No problem at all. Later that afternoon, as Romy arranged flowers in the grand hall where the gala would take place, Jacob found her. I hear my father has rearranged the program, he said without preamble. Romy continued her work, not looking up. News travels fast. It's a power play, Jacob said. He's trying to make you look worse by comparison. I'm aware of what he's doing, Romy replied, her voice tight. Jacob watched her for a moment. I've invited someone who might want to hear you play. Now she did look up, her eyes questioning. I can't say who, Jacob continued, but I think it might give you strength to know they'll be there. As Jacob walked away, Romy wondered who this mysterious guest could be. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Marissa's laughter from the adjacent room. That night, Romy returned to her small apartment and spread out her compositions on the kitchen table. She had decided to play her own music at the gala, a piece that expressed her journey, her loss, her silence, and perhaps her return. It would be a risk, but somehow, the thought of playing Mozart while pretending to be less than she was felt like a greater betrayal. She worked late into the night, refining her composition, losing herself in the creative process for the first time in years. When she finally fell asleep, her dreams were filled with music. The next morning, when she arrived at the Halberg estate, her compositions were missing from her locker. Panic seized her as she searched frantically, checking every corner, every shelf. They were gone. Looking for something, Marissa stood in the doorway, a smug smile playing on her lips. My sheet music, Romy said, struggling to keep her voice steady. It was in my locker. Oh, how strange. Marissa examined her perfectly manicured nails. Maybe one of the cleaning staff threw it away by mistake. You should be more careful with your things. As Marissa sauntered away, Romy knew with absolute certainty that her music hadn't been mistakenly discarded. This was deliberate sabotage for the next few hours. She moved through her tasks in a fog of distress. Without her composition, she would have to revert to Mozart. Exactly what was expected of her, exactly what Douglas wanted. A maid playing simple classical music for the amusement of the wealthy. During her lunch break, Gladys found her sitting alone in the staff room, staring blankly at her untouched sandwich. You look like you've lost your best friend, Gladys observed, sitting down beside her. My music, Romy said hollowly. My compositions. They're gone. Gladys's expression hardened. Gone how? Stolen. From my locker. I've worked here for 20 years, Gladys said slowly. I've seen how these people operate. If something's missing, there's usually a reason and a culprit. She stood up decisively. Finish your lunch. I'm going to do a little investigating. An hour later, as Romy was cleaning the library windows, Gladys approached with a determined look. Check the kitchen trash, she whispered. The one by the service exit. I saw Marissa coming from that direction earlier, looking mighty pleased with herself. Romy slipped away as soon as she could and searched the trash bin. Buried beneath coffee grounds and fruit peels were her torn compositions. Crumpled, stained, but salvageable. She carefully extracted each sheet, fighting back tears of relief. Elliot appeared in the doorway. What happened? He asked, taking in the scene. Someone tried to make sure I couldn't play my own music, Romy explained, smoothing out a wrinkled page. Elliot pulled out his phone. I took photos, he admitted. That day I heard you playing. I hope you don't mind, but I could see what you were creating was special. He showed her the screen, clear images of her compositions, pages she thought had been lost forever. I can print these for you, he offered. Better than trying to piece together the originals. For the first time since she'd agreed to play at the gala, Romy felt a spark of hope. Thank you, she whispered that evening as staff prepared the grand hall for the gala. Jacob approached Romy with news that made her freeze in her tracks. He's confirmed, Jacob said quietly. Leo Tucker. He's coming tomorrow night. Romy nearly dropped the vase she was holding. Leo? But how? What? I tracked him down through my foundation work, Jacob explained. He's in a wheelchair now, but his mind is sharp as ever. When I mentioned your name, he insisted on coming. I haven't seen him in 15 years, Romy said, panic rising in her voice. He hasn't heard me play since I was a teenager. Isn't that all the more reason to show him how you've grown? Jacob asked gently. Romy shook her head, overwhelmed. What if I disappoint him? Before Jacob could respond, Quinn called him away, leaving Romy alone with her thoughts. Leo Tucker, her mentor, the man who had seen her potential when no one else had, would be in the audience tomorrow night. The pressure was almost unbearable. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Romy returned to the estate. Using her staff key, she slipped into the grand hall and sat at the piano. In the empty room, illuminated only by moonlight, she began to play her composition, pouring all her fear, hope, and long-suppressed talent into the music. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the figure in the wheelchair who had been quietly admitted through a side door by Jacob. Only when she finished, the last notes hanging in the air like a question, did she hear a familiar voice. You've grown, little bird. Romy turned, her heart stopping at the sight of Leo Tucker. Older, frielier, but with the same keen eyes that had always seen straight through to her soul. Leo, she whispered, rising from the bench. Did you think I wouldn't recognize your music? He asked, his voice roughened by age, but still carrying the warmth she remembered. Even after all these years, tears spilled down Romy's cheeks as she crossed the room and knelt beside his wheelchair, taking his weathered hands in hers. I stopped playing, she confessed. After Mom died, I broke my promise to her. Leo's fingers tightened around hers. Music never leaves us, child. It just waits for us to find our way back. They talked late into the night, Romy sharing the story of her years of silence. Leo listening with the same patient attention he had shown during their lessons years ago. As dawn approached, Leo said, play for me one more time. The piece you'll perform tonight. And so, as the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Romy played her composition for the man who had taught her that music was more than notes on a page. It was the language of her soul, unknown to both of them. Elliot stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with tears in his eyes. As Romy finished playing, he stepped forward. Mr. Halberg, he said, addressing Douglas, who had just arrived for an early morning meeting. That maid you've been joking about? She's the one who made that piece you just cried over. Douglas stared at Romy, then at Leo, confusion giving way to the first flickers of understanding. The night of the gala arrived with a flurry of activity. The Halberg estate had been transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the grand hall, where round tables draped in pristine white linens surrounded a small stage. At its center stood the magnificent Steinway grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the light like a black mirror. Champagne flowed freely as Douglas Halberg moved among his guests, accepting compliments on the stunning venue and hinting at the evening's special entertainment. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing elegant background music as waitstaff. Romy's colleagues circulated with trays of canapés. In a small room off the kitchen, Romy sat alone, dressed not in her usual maid's uniform but in a simple black dress borrowed from Gladys. Her hands rested in her lap, perfectly still, as she focused on her breathing. The compositions Elliot had printed for her lay on a table nearby, though she wouldn't need them. The music was etched in her heart. The soft knock at the door broke her concentration. Jacob entered, his expression a mixture of concern and excitement. Everyone's seated, he said. Are you ready? Romy nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Leo is in place, Jacob continued. Front row, just to the right of the stage. And Elliot brought someone, a critic from the New York Symphony Review. Another critic? Romy asked, her voice barely audible. This one's different, Jacob assured her. He's here because Elliot told him your story. In the grand hall, Marissa Halberg was in her element, flaunting her social connections to anyone who would listen. She wore a designer gown that had cost more than Romy's annual salary. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. Julian is going to write about tonight's performances for his column, she told a group of admiring friends. gesturing toward a thin, serious-looking man seated nearby. "I've told him to expect something unusual from our staff segment." Julian Kent, music critic for the Metropolitan Arts Review, nodded absently, already looking bored. He had demolished the careers of promising musicians with his scathing reviews and clearly considered this charity event beneath his usual standards. Beside him sat the critic Elliot had invited, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She leaned over to speak with Leo Tucker, who sat in his wheelchair at the end of the front row. "Is it really her, Leo?" she asked softly. Leo's blind eyes crinkled at the corners. "Wait and see, Beatrice. Wait and see." The lights dimmed slightly, and Douglas took the stage to enthusiastic applause. He welcomed his guests with practiced charm, highlighting the charitable causes that would benefit from the evening's donations. Then, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he announced, "The first performance. At Halberg Enterprises, we believe in the hidden talents of all our people," he said smoothly. "Tonight, we have a special treat. A member of our household staff has volunteered to share her musical abilities with us. Please welcome Romina Carter." A smattering of polite applause followed as Romy walked onto the stage. Some guests exchanged glances, clearly surprised by this unusual programming. Others smiled indulgently, amused by the novelty of a maid performing at such a prestigious event. Romy took her place at the piano, her expression serene despite the turmoil inside her. She adjusted the bench slightly, placed her hands on the keys, and took a deep breath. For a moment, she hesitated. She could still play the Mozart piece, safe, expected, unremarkable. No one would know what she was capable of. She could remain invisible, as she had been for years. Then her eyes found Leo in the front row. Although he couldn't see her, his presence gave her strength. Beside him, Jacob nodded encouragingly. Romy began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, a reflection of her uncertainty. A simple melody in a minor key that spoke of loss and longing. The audience shifted restlessly, some already losing interest in what they assumed would be an amateur performance. But then the music began to change. The melody grew more complex, her left hand introducing a counterpoint that intertwined with the right in a dance of increasing complexity. Her touch became more confident, the dynamics shifting from pianissimo to a growing crescendo. The restless movements in the audience stilled. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes were now fixed on the woman at the piano, whose transformation was as remarkable as the music she created. Romy's composition bloomed into something extraordinary, a piece that defied easy categorization. Classical structure melded with jazz harmonies, emotional depth with technical brilliance. It was the story of her life, told through music, her early promise, the devastating loss of her mother, the years of silence, and now, this moment of rebirth. In the front row, Leo's eyes were closed, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Beside him, the critic Beatrice sat perfectly still, her expression one of wonder. Marissa watched, frozen in her seat, her planned mockery crumbling as the reality of Romy's talent became undeniable. Julian Kent had put down his champagne, his practiced boredom replaced by genuine attention. As the music built toward its climax, Romy's hands flew across the keyboard with astonishing speed and precision. The emotion in the hall was palpable. Some guests were openly crying. Others sat with parted lips, unable to believe that such profound music was coming from someone they had overlooked, someone they had deemed insignificant. The final passage was a return to the opening theme, but transformed, now in a major key, resolute and hopeful. The last notes hung in the air like a promise, then faded into silence. For several seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. The silence was absolute. Then, slowly, Leo Tucker raised his hands and began to clap. Jacob joined him, then Elliot, then Beatrice. One by one, the guests rose to their feet, applause building into a thunderous standing ovation. Romy sat motionless at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected polite applause at best, derision at worst. She had not expected this recognition, this validation of her gift. Only Douglas remained seated, his expression a complex mixture of shock, embarrassment, and dawning realization. He had invited Romy to perform as a joke, a moment of entertainment at the expense of someone he considered beneath him. Now, as his guests showered her with accolades, he was faced with the consequences of his arrogance. Finally, he stood and approached the stage. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. Before Romy could respond, Elliot stepped forward. "She's the genius you all laughed at," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Romina Carter was once hailed as one of the most promising pianists of her generation before tragedy forced her from the stage. The applause gradually subsided as guests strained to hear this unexpected revelation that a distinguished-looking man made his way to the front of the room. William Reynolds, director of the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet hall, "I would be honored if you would consider applying for our Advanced Composition Fellowship. Your talent is extraordinary." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marissa, her face flushed with humiliation, pushed back her chair and stormed out of the hall, followed by concerned glances from her friends. Romy stood from the piano bench and acknowledged the audience with a single, graceful bow. She didn't speak. There were no words adequate for this moment. Instead, she walked quietly off the stage and through a side door, needing space to process what had just happened in a small anteroom. She leaned against the wall, her hands trembling now that the performance was over. Years of suppressed emotion washed over her: grief for her mother, the pain of giving up her dream, the loneliness of her self-imposed exile from music. But beneath it all was something new: relief. The burden of hiding, of pretending to be less than she was, had finally been lifted. Jacob found her there a few minutes later. "Everyone's asking for you," he said gently. "You've caused quite a stir." Romy shook her head. "I need a moment." "Of course." He hesitated, then added, "Leo is overwhelmed with pride. He can't stop telling everyone that you were his student." A small smile crossed Romy's face. "I never thought I'd play for him again." "You didn't just play," Jacob said. "You created something magnificent. Something true." In the main hall, the scheduled program continued, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. Natalie Brooks, who followed Romy's performance, played flawlessly but received only polite applause. The guests were still processing what they had witnessed, not just a display of unexpected talent, but a profound reminder of how easily they dismissed those they considered beneath them. Douglas Halberg moved through the crowd with a fixed smile, fielding questions about Romy that he couldn't answer. How long had she worked for him? Did he know about her background? Why was she working as a maid when she could be performing on the world's greatest stages? Each question underscored his ignorance, his failure to see the person behind the uniform. The evening drew to a close. Romy finally emerged to say goodbye to Leo. They spoke quietly in a corner, their conversation private amidst the bustle of departing guests. "You kept your promise after all," Leo told her, squeezing her hand. "You kept playing, in your heart, where it matters most." "I don't know what happens next," Romy admitted. "That's the beauty of it," Leo replied. "For the first time in 15 years, your future is unwritten." The next morning, as Romy arrived for her shift, uncertain whether she still had a job after the previous night's revelation, she found a handwritten note in her locker. "Never hide again, Leo." She tucked the note into her pocket, a talisman for whatever lay ahead. The morning after the gala, Romy woke to her phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, she reached for it, expecting perhaps a message from Jacob or Gladys. Instead, she found 17 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and notifications from social media accounts she rarely used. "What on earth?" she murmured. Sitting up in her small bed, she opened her messages to find one from Elliot. "Check YouTube. Someone filmed your performance. It's everywhere." With trembling fingers, Romy typed "Maid pianist Halberg" into the search bar. The top result was a video titled "Maid stuns millionaires with soulful masterpiece," with over 300,000 views, and it had only been posted 6 hours ago. She pressed play and watched herself at the piano, lost in the music she'd created, while the camera occasionally panned to show the astonished faces of the audience. The comments section was flooded with responses. "Who is she? I'm in tears. This is what raw talent looks like." The way those rich people looked shook. "Someone get this woman a recording contract now." Romy put down her phone, overwhelmed. Her sanctuary of anonymity was gone. The quiet life she had, carefully constructed over 15 years, had been dismantled in a single night. Her doorbell rang, startling her. When she peered through the peephole, she saw a woman holding a microphone, a man with a camera hovering behind her. Press. Already she stepped away from the door, heart pounding. This was exactly what she had feared. Exposure, scrutiny, expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. Her phone buzzed again. "Jacob, are you okay?" His text read. "I can come get you if you need to escape the reporters." Romy texted back, "How? Did they find my address?" "Marissa," came the reply. "She's furious and trying to control the narrative." Meanwhile, across town at the Halberg estate, Douglas was in crisis mode, surrounded by his PR team in his wood-paneled study. The video of Romy's performance had been picked up by local news outlets and was spreading rapidly through social media. Hashtag Maid Mozart was trending, though what she'd played had been far from Mozart. "This is a PR nightmare," Douglas said, pacing the room. "I look like an elitist who mocked a brilliant black artist and relegated her to cleaning my toilets." "Which is exactly what happened," Quinn remarked quietly from the corner. Douglas shot him a withering look. "The question is how we spin this. We need to position me as her discoverer, her patron." A young PR associate cleared her throat. "With all due respect, Mr. Halberg, that approach could backfire badly. Social media is already calling out the power dynamics at play. Any attempt to take credit for her talent will be seen as further exploitation." Douglas sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. For the first time in his life, he was facing a situation he couldn't control with money or influence. Across the hall, Marissa was conducting damage control of her own, speaking rapidly into her phone as she paced her bedroom. "Yes, I know what I said on the podcast," she hissed. "But you need to edit that part out before it goes live. I never said I discovered her talent. I said we gave her an opportunity to perform." She paused, listening. "What do you mean it's already been posted? Take it down. This is my reputation at stake." But it was too late. Clips of Marissa's podcast interview were already circulating. Her claims that she had always seen something special in Romy and had been instrumental in getting her on stage, juxtaposed with footage from the gala showing her mocking smile as Romy took the stage. The backlash was swift and merciless. Hashtag Marissa Halberg a liar began trending alongside hashtag Maid Mozart. For Romy, the day passed in a blur of ignored calls and declined interview requests. She sat on her worn sofa, alternating between anxiety and a strange, unexpected sense of relief. The secret she had carried for so long was finally out. There was fear in that, yes, but also liberation. In the evening, she received a call from Leo. Despite her reluctance to answer the phone, she couldn't ignore him. "How are you holding up, little bird?" His voice was warm with concern. "I'm hiding in my apartment while reporters camp outside," she admitted. "This isn't what I wanted, Leo." "Maybe not," he said. "But sometimes the universe gives us what we need instead of what we want." "I don't know what to do next," Romy confessed. "Everyone wants something from me now. Interviews, performances, recordings. I've been invisible for so long. I don't know how to be seen." "Then start small," Leo advised. "Choose one thing, not for them, but for you. What does Romina Carter want to play, and for whom?" The question lingered with her long after they hung up. What did she want? For 15 years, survival had been her only goal. Dreams had seemed like luxuries she couldn't afford. The next day, Romy received an alarming call from Gladys. Leo had collapsed and been rushed to Memorial Hospital. Without hesitation, she called a taxi and made her way there, pulling a hat low over her face to avoid being recognized. She found Leo in a private room, looking small and frail against the white hospital sheets. His blind eyes turned toward the sound of her footsteps. "Don't look so worried," he said before she could speak. "It's just this old heart acting up again." Romy took his hand, alarmed at how cold it felt. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" "Because you would have looked at me exactly the way you're looking at me now," Leo replied with a weak smile. "Like I'm made of glass." A doctor entered, reviewed Leo's chart, and explained that while his condition was stable, the episode had been serious. His heart was weakening, and his time was limited, months, perhaps, rather than years. After the doctor left, Leo turned his face toward Romy. "Don't waste time mourning me while I'm still here. he said firmly. I've had a good run. But you have so much still to give. Don't wait like I did. What do you mean? Romy asked. I stopped performing too early because I was afraid of failing, Leo admitted. Fear is the only thing in this world that gets stronger the more you feed it. Don't make my mistake. When Romy returned to the Halberg estate the following day, uncertain if she still had a job but needing the structure of routine, she was surprised to find Quinn waiting for her at the staff entrance. For the first time since she'd known him, the estate manager looked uncomfortable, even remorseful. Ms. Carter, he began formally. I owe you an apology. Romy stood still, unprepared for this. I treated you as less than you are. Quinn continued. I was complicit in everything that happened. And I'm sorry. His sincerity caught her off guard. Thank you, she said simply. For what it's worth, I don't expect forgiveness, Quinn added. I just wanted you to know that I recognize my mistake. And regardless of what you decide to do next, your position here remains open if you want it. As she moved through her familiar tasks that day, Romy felt the strange duality of her situation. To most of the world, she was now the Maid pianist, a viral sensation, a symbol of overlooked genius. But within these walls, she was still Romy who changed the linens and polished the silver. Albeit with a new undercurrent of respect from the staff and awkward avoidance from Douglas. That afternoon, she received an email that gave her pause. The director of a local music conservatory was inviting her to perform at their annual fundraiser, not as a curiosity or novelty, but as a featured artist. The proceeds would go toward scholarships for underprivileged youth. There would be no press, no recordings, just music, shared with people who understood its value. For the first time since the gala, Romy felt a spark of genuine interest. This wasn't about fame or redemption. It was about giving back, about using her gift to open doors for others as Leo had once done for her. She replied with a simple yes. As she was leaving that evening, Jacob caught up with her in the driveway. I heard about the conservatory invitation, he said. I think it's perfect for you. How did you know about that? Romy asked. Jacob smiled sheepishly. I may have suggested. They reach out to you. The director is an old friend from college. Romy felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. Thank you. It feels right. Unlike my sister's latest attempt at damage control, Jacob said, his expression darkening. She's been making calls, trying to have you blacklisted from performing at any elite venues in the city. Why would she do that? Romy asked, though she wasn't truly surprised. Because you revealed something she spent her life denying, that privilege and talent aren't the same thing, Jacob replied. Fortunately, Elliot caught wind of it and has been making countercalls. In the battle of influence, a respected music critic apparently outranks a socialite. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Romy opened the journal she had kept sporadically over the years. She hadn't written in it since before the gala, and now she felt compelled to capture the whirlwind of the past few days. For years, I thought silence protected me, she wrote. But music was never meant to be hidden, only heard. I'm terrified of what comes next, but for the first time in so long, I'm also curious. Maybe that's enough for now. To be curious instead of afraid. 3 weeks after the gala, life at the Halberg estate had settled into an uneasy new normal. Romy had returned to work, finding comfort in the familiar routine while she navigated the unexpected turns her life had taken. The media frenzy had died down somewhat. Though her performance video had now surpassed 2 million views, she was carefully separating linens in the laundry room when Gladys appeared in the doorway, an unusual expression on her face. There's someone here to see you, Gladys said. A woman. Says her name is Vanessa Carter. Romy froze. Carter? Did she say what she wants? Only that she's your half-sister. Your father's daughter. The laundry forgotten, Romy followed Gladys to the staff break room where a woman in her late 20s waited. She had Romy's high cheekbones and full lips, though her skin was several shades lighter. Her nervous smile revealed a familiar dimple in her right cheek, their father's dimple. Romina, the woman said, standing. I'm Vanessa. I've been looking for you for years. Romy stood rooted to the spot, a flood of emotions rendering her speechless. This stranger with her father's smile was claiming to be family she hadn't known existed. How did you find me? Romy finally asked. The video, Vanessa explained. I recognized your name, and then your face. You look just like the pictures my dad kept. Your dad. Romy repeated, the words hollow. Our dad. The man who walked out on my mother and me when she got sick. Vanessa's expression crumpled. It's complicated. I know he hurt you. He told me everything before his stroke 3 years ago. Stroke. Despite herself, Romy felt a pang of something. Not quite concern, not quite indifference. He's in a care facility in New Jersey, Vanessa said. He can't speak well anymore, but his mind is clear. When I showed him your video, he cried. Romy sank into a chair, overwhelmed by this unexpected connection to her past. I don't know what you want from me. Nothing, Vanessa assured her. I just thought you should know you have family. And maybe our father deserves a chance to explain before it's too late. The suggestion hung in the air between them, an unwelcome disruption to the careful boundaries Romy had constructed around her pain. Later that week, after days of internal debate, Romy found herself standing outside Pine Grove Care Center, a modest facility nestled among trees in suburban New Jersey. Jacob had offered to drive her, but this was a journey she needed to make alone. The nurse at the reception desk directed her to room 217. With each step down the antiseptic-scented hallway, Romy's resolve wavered. 15 years of abandonment, of birthdays and graduations, and her mother's funeral, all without her father. What could he possibly say to justify that? She paused outside the door, hand raised to knock, nearly turning back. Then she remembered Leo's words. Fear is the only thing in this world that gets stronger the more you feed it. She knocked out a thin, reedy voice called, "Come in." The man in the hospital bed bore little resemblance to the strong, vibrant father of her childhood. James Carter was gaunt, his once robust frame diminished, the right side of his face slightly drooping from the stroke. But his eyes, her eyes, widened in recognition and immediately filled with tears. Romina, he managed, the word slurred. But unmistakable, she stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Vanessa said you wanted to see me. He gestured weakly to the chair beside his bed. After a moment's hesitation, Romy sat, maintaining her emotional distance. I saw you play, he said slowly, each word an effort. Beautiful, like your mother. Don't talk about her, Romy said sharply. You lost that right when you left us. Tears leaked from the corner of his eye. I know, he acknowledged. Unforgivable. Then what? The question that had haunted her for 15 years finally escaped. Why did you leave when she needed you most? When I needed you. James struggled to sit up straighter, determined to get the words out. Coward, he said, pointing to himself. Your mother was the strong one. Her sickness. I couldn't watch her die. Couldn't face it. He paused, gathering strength. Not just her illness. My failure. No money for treatments. No. Way to save her. So you ran, Romy said flatly. He nodded, shame evident in every line of his face. Biggest regret. Every day since. The conversation was exhausting for both of them. James limited by his impaired speech, Romy by the weight of her resentment. But slowly, painfully, the truth emerged. He had abandoned music along with his family, too reminded of Elaine, Romy's mother, who had been his first audience, his greatest supporter. He had started a new family with Vanessa's mother, trying to outrun his guilt, but it had followed him like a shadow. Not hatred, he insisted, reaching for Romy's hand. She didn't take it, but she didn't move away either. Never hatred. Fear. Guilt. Shame. As she prepared to leave, James gestured to a box on his nightstand. For you, he said. From your mother. Confused, Romy opened it to find letters, dozens of them, and cassette tapes labeled with dates. What are these? Elaine knew. James explained haltingly. Knew she was dying. Made recordings. For you. For milestones. His eyes filled again. Sweet 16. Graduation. Wedding someday. I kept them. Couldn't give them to you. Too ashamed. Romy stared at the box, this unexpected treasure trove of her mother's voice, her thoughts, preserved all these years. There's more, James added. At Gladys's house. Gladys. Romy repeated, startled. What does she have to do with this? Old friend. Of your mother's. From church. Each phrase came with effort. She kept things. For you. In case. The drive back to the city was a blur, Romy's mind reeling with revelations. Her mother had prepared for her own death, creating messages for the daughter she knew she would leave behind. Gladys, practical, no-nonsense Gladys, had been connected to her mother all along, silently watching over Romy without ever revealing their shared past. When she arrived at Gladys's modest house that evening, the older woman was waiting for her, a cardboard box on the kitchen table. "I wanted to tell you," Gladys said without preamble. "So many times. But you were so closed off, so determined to bury that part of your life. I was afraid pushing would only make you retreat further." "All this time," Romy said, still processing. "You knew who I was, where I came from. I recognized your name. The day you applied at the Halbergs," Gladys confirmed. "Elaine and I sang in the same church choir for years. She was my friend. When she knew she was dying, she asked me to keep some things for you, in case you ever came looking for your past." Romy opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were photo albums, notebooks filled with her mother's handwriting, and a small cassette player with a tape already loaded. A label on it read simply, "For Romy, when she finds her music again." That night, alone in her apartment, Romy pressed play on the cassette player. The sound of her mother's voice, strong, vibrant, without the weakness of her final days, filled the room. "My darling girl," Elaine's recorded voice began. "If you're listening to this, then you've found your way back to music. I always knew you would. Your gift is too powerful to stay buried forever. I'm so proud of you, Romina. Not just for your talent, but for your resilience, your heart. Play for yourself first, always. The rest of the world can wait their turn." Tears streamed down Romy's face as she listened to her mother's message from 15 years ago, a bridge across time, across loss, reconnecting her to the woman who had first placed her small hands on piano keys and said, "Play what you feel, baby, not just what you see on the page." The next morning, Elliot's feature article was published in the Metropolitan Music Review. The music between the notes, Romina Carter's return. It wasn't merely a journalistic piece, but a deeply personal exploration of talent, loss, silence, and redemption. He had interviewed Leo, Jacob, and several music professors who had watched the video of Romy's performance. The article concluded, "In an age of manufactured overnight sensations, Romina Carter represents something far more profound, genuine artistic expression born of lived experience. Her journey reminds us that true talent cannot be extinguished, only temporarily silenced. And in that silence, sometimes the most powerful compositions take root." The article went viral almost immediately, generating a new wave of interest in Romy's story. Requests for interviews multiplied, and offers from record labels began to arrive. Douglas Halberg, seeing an opportunity to rehabilitate his image, announced that the Halberg estate would host a series of emerging artist showcases, with Romy highlighted as the extraordinary talent discovered within our own community. When Jacob showed Romy the press release, she couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. "He's marketing the estate as a birthplace of genius? The same place where he had me scrubbing toilets while making jokes about the help." Jacob's face darkened with anger. "This ends now," he said, pulling out his phone. That evening, he posted a statement on his social media accounts that quickly overshadowed his father's PR effort. "My father didn't discover Romina Carter. He belittled her. We don't owe her credit. We owe her respect and an apology for failing to recognize not just her extraordinary talent, but her fundamental humanity." The story isn't about redemption for the Halberg name, but about Ms. Carter's resilience despite the obstacles placed in her path. The post was shared thousands of times within hours, creating yet another PR crisis for Douglas and widespread support for Romy. As the media storm swirled around her, Romy found herself drawn to places from her past. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, she took the subway to her old neighborhood in Harlem, finding her way to the apartment building where she had grown up, where she had first learned to play on an old, upright piano her mother had purchased from a church rummage sale. The building was still there, but the apartment was boarded up, awaiting renovation or demolition. Romy sat on the stoop, rain dampening her hair, and pulled out a small digital keyboard with headphones. There, on the steps of her past, she began to compose again, not in the grand room of a millionaire's estate, but in the place where her journey had begun. Across town, Marissa Halberg's carefully constructed world was crumbling. An anonymous source had leaked audio from a private conversation in which she had mocked Romy's race and background in crude, explicit terms. The recording spread like wildfire, and the backlash was immediate and severe. Brand sponsorships that had provided her income were pulled overnight. Invitations to social events were rescinded. Former friends distanced themselves publicly. Her fall from grace was as swift as it was complete. As May turned to June, Romy received the news she had been dreading. Leo's condition had deteriorated rapidly. When she arrived at the hospital, the nurse warned her that he was drifting in and out of consciousness. "He's been waiting for you," the nurse said gently. "Holding on, I think." Leo's room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. His breathing was labored, his once powerful hands now delicate as bird wings against the white sheets. Romy sat beside him, taking those hands in hers. "I'm here, Leo," she whispered, his eyelids fluttered open. "Little bird," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "You came." "Of course I came," Romy said, fighting back tears. "You're my family." A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. "Proud of you," he managed. "Always was." They sat together in the gathering dusk, sometimes in silence, sometimes with Romy telling him about her plans for the future, the compositions she was working on, the scholarship fund she wanted to establish in his name. Leo drifted away peacefully that night, Romy holding his hand until the end of a week. Later, his lawyer contacted her. Leo had updated his will after the gala performance. He had left Romy his most prized possession, his Steinway piano, and a handwritten note. "For when you lead the next generation." The polished marble floors of Lincoln Center gleamed under the lights as Romy stood backstage, fingers tracing the worn edges of Leo's handwritten note. 3 months had passed since his funeral, and tonight she would honor his memory in the most fitting way possible, by headlining her first major performance since the viral moment that had changed her life. "5 minutes, Ms. Carter," a stagehand informed her quietly. Romy nodded, tucking the note back into her pocket. She wasn't playing classics tonight, nor was she performing the piece that had stunned the Halberg Gala. This evening, she would debut an original symphonic piece she had composed over the past months, a musical narrative of her journey. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the sold-out audience. Critics, musicians, celebrities, and ordinary people drawn by her story filled the seats. Among them were faces that mattered most to her: Gladys, Jacob, Vanessa, even her father in his wheelchair, brought by special arrangement from his care facility. Nervous, Romy turned to find Elliot adjusting his tie, his own expression betraying anxiousness on her behalf. "Strangely, no," she replied. "This feels right." "Leo would be proud," Elliot said, his voice gentle. "Not just of your music, but of your courage to share it again." The house lights dimmed, signaling it was time. Romy smoothed her dress, a simple but elegant design that felt worlds away from the maid's uniform she had worn for so long. She took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The applause that greeted her was thunderous, but Romy barely registered it. Her focus narrowed to the magnificent Steinway before her, not Leo's, which remained in her apartment as a treasured connection to him, but the concert grand that awaited her fingers. She seated herself, adjusted the bench, and looked out at the audience. For a moment, she caught Jacob's eye in the front row. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. Without preamble, she began to play. The opening notes were deliberate, measured, echoing the controlled rhythm of her days at the Halberg estate. The melody built slowly, complexity layering upon complexity, just as her hidden identity had been composed of many truths beneath a simple exterior. Then came a passage of darkness, of loss, her mother's death, her father's abandonment, her years of silence. The middle movement shifted into something unexpected, elements of Leo's jazz influence weaving through classical structures, creating tensions and resolutions that spoke of struggle and resilience. The audience was absolutely still, captivated by the emotional journey unfolding before them. For the final movement, Romy introduced a new theme: hopeful, questioning, opening toward possibility rather than resolving completely. The future, still being written. When she finished, the silence held for several heartbeats before erupting into applause that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. As Romy stood to acknowledge the audience, she saw something that nearly undid her composure. Her father, with tears streaming down his face, had somehow managed to stand from his wheelchair, supported by Vanessa, to join the standing ovation backstage. After the performance, surrounded by well-wishers and industry executives eager to discuss recording contracts, Romy found herself drawn instead to a quiet corner where Jacob waited. "That wasn't just music," he said when they were finally alone. "That was your story. Our stories are all we really have to share," Romy replied. "Leo taught me that." "Speaking of sharing," Jacob said, his voice taking on a new tone, "I've been thinking about what comes next for both of us." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by Gladys, who embraced Romy fiercely. "Your mother would have burst with pride," she whispered. That was her daughter up there, every note. The evening wound down, the concert hall emptied, and Romy found herself standing on the steps of Lincoln Center in the quiet of night, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. A sense of completion settled over her. Not an ending, but the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The following week, Romy declined 3 recording contract offers that would have made her wealthy overnight. Instead, she announced her intention to open a music school in Harlem, dedicated to providing free education to talented youth who might otherwise never have access to training. The Leo Tucker School of Music and Self-Expression, she explained to a small gathering of supporters in a community center not far from where she had taken her first lessons with Leo. Not just for prodigies, but for anyone with the passion to learn. Jacob had thrown himself into the project, helping with administrative details and fundraising. Gladys had agreed to manage the day-to-day operations once the school opened. Even Vanessa, who had revealed a talent for organization that complemented her half-sister's artistic focus, had taken on a role in curriculum development. "You're turning down millions to teach kids in Harlem?" a skeptical reporter asked at the press conference announcing the school. "I'm investing in something more valuable than money," Romy replied with quiet confidence. "I'm investing in potential," the reporter persisted. "But after all those years cleaning houses, don't you want financial security?" "Security doesn't come from a bank balance," Romy said. "It comes from purpose, from community, from using your gifts in ways that matter." As fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and changing leaves, Romy received an invitation to appear on National Morning, one of the country's most watched interview programs. Her initial instinct was to decline. She had been selective about media appearances, preferring to let her music and her work speak for themselves. But this invitation was different. The producers weren't interested in the sensationalized, Maid-to-Maestro narrative that had dominated earlier coverage. They wanted her to discuss classism in the arts, the silencing of talent in marginalized communities, and the importance of creative identity for young artists. "This isn't about entertainment," the producer assured her. "It's about starting important conversations." Romy agreed, and on a crisp October morning, she found herself in a Manhattan studio, seated across from host Alicia Palmer. "Ms. Carter, your story has captivated millions," Alicia began. "But today, I'd like to go deeper than the headlines. You've spoken about musical silencing. Can you explain what that means?" Romy considered her words carefully. Silencing happens in many ways. Sometimes it's economic, talent that never develops because lessons are too expensive, instruments unaffordable. Sometimes it's cultural, voices deemed less valuable because they don't fit established traditions. And sometimes it's internal, we silence ourselves because we've internalized the message that our expressions don't matter. "You experienced all 3, Alicia observed. "I did," Romy acknowledged. "But I was fortunate to have Leo Tucker, who refused to let my voice be extinguished completely. Too many others never find their Leo." The conversation shifted to her school, to her vision for a more inclusive musical landscape, to the ways in which art could bridge divides of class and culture. Throughout, Romy spoke with the quiet authority that had become her hallmark, thoughtful, measured, but unflinching in her truth. As the interview concluded, Alicia asked one final question. "What would you say to someone watching who feels their own creative voice has been silenced?" Romy smiled. "I would tell them that silence can be a cocoon, not just a cage. That sometimes, in the quiet, we grow stronger. And when we finally emerge, our song is all the more powerful for having been held back so long." The interview was widely shared and discussed, further cementing Romy's reputation not just as a musician, but as an eloquent advocate for artistic access and expression. A week later, Romy received a letter from a 10-year-old girl in Detroit. Dear Miss Carter, my name is Zoe, and I saw you on TV. My mom and I watched your video too. The one where you played piano for all those rich people who didn't know you were so good. I'm learning piano too, but sometimes kids at school make fun of me for it instead of playing sports or doing cool things. Your music told me I'm not invisible. My teacher says I have talent, but we can't afford many lessons. I practice on the school piano at lunch. Someday, I want to play like you. Thank you for showing me it's okay to love music, even when people don't understand. Your friend, Zoe Wilson. Romy read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision. She immediately wrote back, enclosing information about scholarship programs and a personal invitation to visit the school once it opened. But more importantly, she shared her own experiences of practicing in secret, of finding moments and spaces to nurture her gift when circumstances seemed determined to suppress it. Music finds a way, she wrote. And so do we. Across town, in his study at the Halberg estate, Douglas sat alone, staring at a newspaper featuring a front-page article about Romy's school. The photo showed her surrounded by children at a community center, her face alight with purpose and joy. Quinn entered with a stack of documents requiring signatures, pausing when he noticed what had captured his employer's attention. She's doing remarkable work, Quinn observed carefully. Douglas was silent for a long moment. I almost destroyed something priceless, he finally said, his voice unusually subdued. Out of ignorance. Out of arrogance. It was the closest he had come to acknowledging his role in Romy's story, not the redemptive arc he had tried to claim in the aftermath of her viral moment, but the humbling recognition of his own failure to see the person behind the uniform. Perhaps, Quinn suggested gently, it's not too late to support her work, without taking credit for it. Douglas nodded slowly, an idea taking shape. Arrange a donation to her school, he said. Anonymous, substantial, and Quinn, not a word, to Jacob or anyone else about the source. As winter approached, Romy made one final visit to the Halberg estate. She had officially resigned her position months earlier, but had agreed to help train her replacement. Today, however, she had come for a different purpose, to retrieve the practice piano she had used during her employment, which Douglas had offered to donate to her school. The house was quiet as she walked through the familiar halls, memories echoing with each step. In the grand room where she had first been volunteered to perform for fun, she paused, allowing herself to fully absorb how far she had come from that moment of humiliation. Marissa was gone, having moved abroad after her social and professional collapse. She was rumored to be working a modest job in London, her former status as a celebrated socialite erased by her own cruelty. As Romy supervised the movers carefully loading the piano, she felt no triumph in Marissa's downfall, only a complicated mixture of justice served and human regret for potential wasted by prejudice. One final thing, Jacob said, appearing beside her as the movers finished their work. He handed her a small, intricately carved wooden box. I found this in the attic. It's from the 1920s, when this house was first built. The original owner was apparently a composer too. Romy opened the box to find it was a music box. When she wound the key, it played a delicate, wistful melody. It's beautiful, she said, genuinely touched. There's more, Jacob said, suddenly looking nervous. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet pouch. This isn't about grand gestures or fairy tales, he said quietly. It's about two people who see each other, really see each other. From the pouch, he withdrew a simple silver ring with a small sapphire that caught the light. The music box plays your composition, the one from the gala. I had it specially made. Romy stared at him, momentarily speechless. Too soon? Jacob asked, uncertainty crossing his face. Her smile was the only answer he needed. Spring sunshine streamed through the tall windows of the newly renovated brownstone in Harlem, illuminating the space that would soon become the Leo Tucker School of Music and Self-Expression. Workers were putting the finishing touches on practice rooms, installing acoustic panels, and tuning the donated pianos that lined the main teaching area. Romy moved through the space with purpose, making notes on her clipboard and conferring with contractors. The school would open its doors in 1 month, and everything needed to be perfect. The delivery from Steinway just arrived. Jacob called from the entrance. 6 new uprights for the beginner classrooms. The anonymous donor again? Romy asked. Raising an eyebrow, Jacob shrugged. The foundation that made the initial contribution has been incredibly generous. Though neither said it aloud, both suspected the source of the mysterious funds that had accelerated the school's development. Douglas's fingerprints were nowhere to be found on the donations, but the timing and specific nature of the contributions suggested someone intimately familiar with their needs. Gladys bustled in. Her practical energy focused now on organizing the administrative systems that would keep the school running smoothly. We've received 37 applications for the scholarship program already, she announced, and the list of volunteer instructors keeps growing. 3 from Juilliard and 2 from Manhattan School of Music. The journey from concept to reality had been swift, fueled by Romy's clear vision and the network of supporters who had rallied around her cause. The viral nature of her story had opened doors, but it was her authentic passion and meticulous planning that had turned opportunity into achievement. 1 week before the school's grand opening, Romy received an invitation to appear on Crossroads, a prestigious television program featuring in-depth conversations with cultural figures. Initially hesitant to step back into the spotlight when there was still so much work to be done at the school, she reconsidered when she learned the focus would be on educational access in the arts rather than her personal story. The interview took place in the school itself, with host Michael Bronson seated across from Romy in what would soon be the main performance space. This building has history, Michael observed, looking around at the restored architecture. Much like its founder, every space has stories embedded in its walls, Romy agreed. This building was originally a community center where Leo Tucker taught. It feels right to continue that legacy. The conversation flowed naturally from the school's mission to broader questions about artistic identity and creative resilience. You've spoken about music as a form of truth-telling, Michael noted. How does that philosophy inform your approach to teaching? Technical proficiency matters, Romy explained, but technique without truth is just performance. We want our students to find their authentic voice, whether that's through classical traditions, jazz innovations, or entirely new forms they create themselves. As the interview concluded, Michael asked her to play something, not for ratings or spectacle, but as a genuine expression of what the school represented. Romy seated herself at Leo's Steinway, which now held a place of honor in the performance space. She played a new piece she had composed specifically for the school's opening, titled Window Light, inspired by the small window she used to stare through while cleaning the Halberg estate, dreaming of a different life. The composition was hopeful yet grounded, ambitious yet accessible, much like the school itself. After the interview aired, applications for the school's programs doubled overnight. What had begun as a local initiative was evolving into a model that educators from across the country were eager to learn from and replicate. That on a warm evening in late May, Jacob and Romy walked along the Hudson River, taking a rare moment away from the whirlwind of the school's final preparations. The river glittered with reflected city lights, and a street musician played saxophone in the distance. I've been thinking, Jacob said, as they paused to watch a boat pass by, about next steps. For the school, Romy asked. For us, he clarified. We've been so focused on building the school, we haven't had much time to plan our own future. From his pocket, he produced not a ring box, as might have been expected, but a small music box, similar to the one he had given her months earlier, but more worn, clearly antique. It belonged to my grandmother, he explained as Romy examined it. She was an amateur pianist who never had the opportunity to pursue her talent professionally. My grandfather gave it to her on their wedding day. When Romy opened it, the mechanism played the first few notes of her composition from the gala, the piece that had changed everything. How is that possible? She whispered. This box is decades old. I had it modified, Jacob admitted with a smile. The original melody is preserved inside, but I wanted it to play your music too, a bridge between past and future. Romy's smile was answer enough. She didn't need grand declarations or theatrical proposals. This thoughtful gesture, connecting her music to a family legacy, spoke volumes about the partnership they had built. Summer brought the official opening of the Leo Tucker School of Music and Self-Expression. The ceremony was intentionally modest, focused on the students rather than celebrities or media attention. 50 young musicians, ranging in age from 7 to 18, had been selected for the inaugural class, each with remarkable talent and limited resources. Romy addressed the gathered families. She spoke not as a viral sensation or concert pianist, but as someone who understood the challenges they faced. This school exists because music belongs to everyone, she said simply. Not just to those who can afford lessons or instruments or special opportunities. Your children have gifts that deserve to be nurtured, voices that deserve to be heard. The first semester exceeded all expectations. Students progressed rapidly under the guidance of dedicated instructors, many of whom volunteered their time. Weekend master classes drew participants from across the city. The scholarship fund, bolstered by the anonymous donations and supplemented by modest grants, ensured that no talented student was turned away for financial reasons. In October, Romy received news that the National Museum of African American Music wanted to create a permanent installation titled From Silence to Symphony, the Romina Carter story. Initially uncomfortable with such personal recognition, she agreed only when the museum explained that the exhibit would focus primarily on the broader historical context of Black classical musicians who had overcome systemic barriers. Your story doesn't exist in isolation, the curator explained during their planning meeting. It's part of a continuum that includes pioneers like Florence Price, Margaret Bonds, and William Grant Still. By sharing your journey, you help illuminate theirs as well. The exhibit opened in the spring, featuring artifacts from Romy's life, including her mother's letters, Leo's handwritten scores, and a video installation that juxtaposed her gala performance with historical footage of Black classical musicians from the past century. Vanessa attended the opening with their father, whose health had stabilized enough for him to travel. Though still physically compromised by his stroke, James Carter's pride was evident as he moved through the exhibit in his wheelchair, occasionally reaching for Romy's hand when emotion overwhelmed him. "Your mother," he said at one point, his speech still labored but improved with therapy, "always said you would change the world with your music." "I'm not sure about changing the world," Romy replied gently, "but maybe changing a few lives is enough." As the second year of the school began, Romy found herself increasingly drawn to composition, often working late into the night after her teaching and administrative duties were complete. She had begun work on a symphony that explored themes of visibility and voice, not just her own journey, but the universal human desire to be truly seen and heard. The piece would premiere the following year with the New York Philharmonic, conducted by a former classmate from her prodigy days who had reached out after seeing her viral performance. The event would raise funds for music education initiatives across the city, creating a virtuous circle of opportunity for the next generation. On a crisp autumn morning, Romy arrived early at the school to find a young girl waiting on the steps, clutching a battered music book and looking nervous. "Are you Miss Carter?" the girl asked, her voice barely audible. "I am," Romy replied, sitting down beside her. "And you are?" "Zoe Wilson, from Detroit. You wrote to me last year." Recognition dawned. The 10-year-old who had sent the touching letter after seeing Romy's interview was now standing before her, a year older and having traveled hundreds of miles. "My mom got a job in New York," Zoe explained. "I told her I wanted to come here more than anything." She hesitated, then added, "We don't have much money, but I practice every day." Romy felt a profound sense of déjà vu, remembering her own childhood determination, the hunger to learn that had driven her to practice on any keyboard she could find. "Come inside," she said, unlocking the door. "Let's hear what you can do." In the quiet of the early morning, with sunlight filtering through the tall windows, Romy led Zoe to the Steinway. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she positioned them over the keys, but when she began to play, a simple Chopin prelude, rendered with remarkable sensitivity, her nervousness fell away. Romy watched, transported back to her own childhood, to Leo Tucker adjusting her fingers on the keys, to her mother beaming with pride from the doorway. The circle was complete. What had once been taken from her, she was now giving freely to others. When Zoe finished playing, she looked up anxiously. "Was that okay?" Romy smiled, gently adjusting the girl's hand position. "It was beautiful," she said. "Now play it how it feels." As Zoe began again, her interpretation more confident and personal. Romy felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This quiet moment, teacher and student, music flowing between generations, was the true culmination of her journey. Not applause in grand concert halls, not viral videos or media attention, but the simple, profound act of passing on what had once been given to her, the gift of being truly heard. In that sunlit room, with music rising like a prayer, Romy Carter was exactly where she belonged. Have you ever wondered how many extraordinary talents remain hidden in plain sight because we refuse to see beyond uniforms and job titles? Like, subscribe, and share for more stories that will challenge what you think you know about the people society overlooks.